panelists as well. Right. We would please note that we are also streaming this particular event live on YouTube, and the event itself will be recorded. Okay, so I've just added the link to the YouTube stream in the chat. So you'd be able to see the link there. Right, good afternoon again to everyone that has joined our webinar this afternoon, and thank you for making the time to be with us. And we will be starting this event in the next minute. Thank you.
So 2 hou vir my die koring dop asseblief.
Yes, I'm joining now, ma'am. Good day, everyone. Please note that there's audio and we will be starting the event shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I want to say to each and every one of you that are present here this afternoon, welcome to the first foundation phase webinar that we are having in Gauteng province. This afternoon, we are going to look into the importance of perceptual development in the foundation phase, laying a strong foundation in literacy and numeracy skills and learner development. Colleagues, due to the number of participants that have registered, the webinar are shared on 2 platforms. 500 participants will join us in the Zoom, and the others will be migrated to a YouTube link from where they will be able to watch the webinar. However, everybody will be able to interact with all of us by using the chat function. So even if you are participating using the webinar from the attending the webinar from YouTube, you can post your questions in the chat box and it will be attended to. Please note that we will have a question and answer session, but in the meantime, as the webinar proceeds, we would like you to post any questions in the question and answer box, as well as in the chat box if you like to. Participants on the YouTube can post any questions in the chat box and it will be migrated back into our chat box on Zoom. So you will not be excluded at any part of the webinar. I want to welcome here this afternoon. That was just a few logistical things. Nobody will be able to open their videos or to unmute yourself to participate currently in the webinar. I would like to welcome everybody here this afternoon. You as the teacher, the HOD, the principal, the deputy principal that are here this afternoon. No, you are the people that this webinar was arranged for. You are the most important people that are here this afternoon. I would also like to welcome all departmental officials, being from Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Free State, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and Northern Cape that are joining us this afternoon, or anybody from the National Department of Education that is in this webinar. You are most welcome and we really appreciate your attendance here. To all the Gauteng colleagues, this is history in the making and we are very glad that you are here today. Without you, we will not be able to hold this webinar. Without all the participants, no webinar will be a success. To all our support from the HEIs, social partners, NGOs, anybody that I might not have mentioned, please know that you are welcome. A special word of welcome to our DDG, Advocate Alison Bankston, also to the chief directors that are attending this afternoon, all the directors that are also here this afternoon. And then, colleagues, to our speakers, because our speakers are going to impart their knowledge with us. Speakers that we have never thought we will be able to hear on a platform such as this. With that being said, I want to say to each and every one of you, I am glad that you are here this afternoon, and I hope you feel duly welcomed here this afternoon. Our program for this afternoon will be starting with the opening remarks by our Chief Director, CCI, Nadine Pote. Then after that, we will have Ms. Nita, Lala, that will take us through perceptual skills and concept formation in the foundation phase. Then Aneen Dhoba will speak to us about promoting the development of visual and auditory skills to ensure effective teaching and learning of languages and mathematics. That will be followed by Mr. Brent Hutchison, that will speak to us from a parent's point of view on the necessity of the perceptual development. Then we will have a questions and answer session. We will close with closing remarks from the director, Antoinette Nicolai from GET Curriculum, and then we will have our vote of thanks after that by Mrs. Kulu Makaga that will be here. Please, just a reminder, post questions in the chat box, and then we can take it from there. Thank you very much. You know what our mission is in Gauteng, that every learner should feel valued and inspired in our innovative education system, and that we are committed to provide functional and modern schools that enable quality teaching and learning to protect and promote the right of every learner to quality, equitable, and relevant education. With that, I would like to hand over to our Chief Director, Ms. Nadine Pote. Thank you. I just want to stop share here. I just want to see if our Chief Director is in the meeting. I know they are currently in a BISCOM meeting, and it might be that she is not available currently to do the opening remarks for us. With that being the case, I will quickly also then share her presentation with each and every one of us so that we can continue, because time is not friendly and time waits for nobody. Time is always on the run. Thank you. Let me just find her presentation and I can share that. And I think I will ask the CS, Mrs. Kulu Makaga, to share, to do the opening remarks for us. Thank you, Kulu.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, Ms. Cornelia Swanepoel. I'm just going to read her opening remarks because I don't want to dilute what she wrote there. The importance of perceptual development in the foundation phase, laying a strong foundation in literacy and numeracy skills and learner development. Due to socioeconomic conditions in South Africa, most of learners enter the schooling system, I think we are all familiar with this, without attending pre-grade R or grade R. Such learners then start with a backlog to learning, compared with a small percentage of learners who were exposed to pre-grade R and grade R. It is therefore important for the schooling system to ensure that all learners are ready for formal learning as well as teaching. It is also important that developmental milestones that were not fully developed prior to formal schooling are addressed to ensure that learners are ready to learn optimally.
Kulu?
I'm muted. Okay, to address challenges at the beginning of grade 1, the GDE has developed a 10-hour perceptual program which focuses on basic skills such as working easily within a group, engaging in a conversation with a friend in a group, playing games that mirror social situations, also learning, willing to share and respect others' belongings, exercising patience by waiting for his or her turn. These are very, very important skills that we want to develop through this program that the department has developed. This webinar, therefore, seeks to strengthen the implementation of the Perceptual program, which is currently implemented in grade 1. The Perceptual program will enhance the development of foundational skills required for literacy and numeracy in the foundation phase. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Kulu. We are then continuing with our presentation for this afternoon. Just a reminder again, please ensure that you share your questions in the chat or in the question and answer box. We start then to say play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning. But for children, play is serious learning. Play is really the work of our childhood. Our first presenter this afternoon is Ms. Nita Lala. Nita Lala is currently a grade 1 learner support educator at Parkview Junior School in Johannesburg. She completed her BSc Occupational Therapy degree at the University of the Witwatersrand in 1999 and practiced as an occupational therapist in community rehabilitation, private pediatrics, elderly care in the UK, and adult psychiatry. She had a deep calling to be an educator. While in a learnership position at Mondier Primary School, Nita acquired a postgraduate certificate in education in the foundation phase through the University of South Africa in 2010 and continued to teach in grade 1 at Mondier Primary School until 2018. Through her experience as an occupational therapist and an educator, she has observed that children's ability to grasp learning concepts can be significantly improved by educators when they identify and address developmental gaps in the class as early as possible. This early intervention can strengthen a child's foundation to learn more effectively throughout their schooling career. With that, thank you very much. I hand over to Nita. Thank you, Nita.
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, so yes, I left occupational therapy to become a teacher, and I often find that people always get stuck in their thoughts about why I did this. And simply put, it was a deep calling, and it was something that I remember from childhood. And then I ended up ignoring it for about 20 years. But now I am doing what I love, and I really love what I'm doing. So public speaking is also new to me. This is my very first experience. I usually feel very comfortable and safe with my audience of 6-year-olds. So whole thumbs for me. So do you identify with this picture? I remember many happy years as a child, playing outdoors with friends and only going indoors to get a nourishing home-cooked meal that my mom had prepared for me. But many of today's children have a very different reality. They do seem to believe, though, that they are happy. My husband and I are constantly working to steer our 9-year-old daughter towards this healthier lifestyle. So teachers are finding that children are entering school with very varying skills. On the one extreme, we have a school-ready child whose mom has had a healthy pregnancy. The child is loved and stimulated and has opportunity to explore and learn. This child will meet his or her developmental milestones. Then on the other hand, on the other extreme, we have a child entering school, but the child is not ready to learn. This child did not receive what was needed to meet developmental milestones. More often than not, this neglect is unintentional, with many parents trying to make ends meet. But then, between these two extremes is a varying spectrum of developmental levels. And all these children with these varying needs enter our education system at the start of each year. So the teacher is then confronted in class with children who struggle to focus and to sit still. They don't listen. They struggle to copy from the board. They have a poor pencil grip. Their self-image is very poor and they struggle to communicate. They lack endurance. They are disorganized. Their basic concepts are not consolidated. And so they start behaving poorly. And then we start seeing a very frustrated child because this child is unable to meet his potential. So then, on top of our usual life challenges, we are having to navigate through COVID-19. So now, children's movement is further restricted. They have more screen time. The opportunity to play and socialize is reduced. And they are being inappropriately stimulated. Their learning is disrupted, and their stress levels are very high. So now the school-ready child is also starting to show signs of struggle. So we're having an increasing number of children in the foundation phase who have missing pieces in their development. And this results to barriers to learning and then poor performance in class. By developing their perceptual motor skills, barriers to learning can be resolved or scaffolded, and the child then has an opportunity to strive towards their potential. . So here you can see the order in which a child's skills are developed. A child is born with primitive reflexes. And these reflexes will help a baby to thrive. But they are then replaced by voluntary movement in the first year of their life. So as the primitive reflexes disappear, the baby then develops core strength and can sit. Gross motor skills are then developed, and the baby crawls and then walks. Fine motor skills are followed by ear and eye development, after which the child develops skills to process sound and visual stimulation. So if all goes well, the child is school ready by 7 years. And from 8 years on, integration of all these mastered skills takes place. So this is a complex process in the brain and the body, and much can go wrong anywhere along the path. So if, for instance, we have a primitive reflex that persists, every other developmental stage after that will be affected. And we have to have lower skills integrated before we can develop our higher skills. And all these skills are integrated. They reinforce each other. But if something goes wrong, they will disrupt each other. So here we have a little baby who is spending too much time confined to a walker or a pram. And this restricted movement causes a primitive reflex to persist. So the reflex called a symmetric tonic neck reflex, it helps the baby to learn how to use the top part of their body separately from the bottom part of their body. And if the reflex persists, then the baby's arms and legs will move involuntarily when he moves his head. This then leads to many challenges for the child. The baby will have poor balance and posture. He will struggle to focus his eyes and have poor depth perception. His visual tracking will be poor, and so will his eye and hand coordination. And then this then leads him to having poor reading fluency. He will struggle to align numbers in mathematics. To stabilize himself, he will W sit on the carpet, and he will anchor his feet to the legs of his chair. This child will struggle to recognize social cues, and there will be behavior problems. So learning becomes very difficult for this child. And they start to demonstrate characteristics of ADD or ADHD. So this child is going to need some perceptual motor development. So if we look at perceptual motor development, there are two parts. So perception is when we use our senses to gather information. So we use our 5 senses, but then we also use our vestibular sense, which involves balance, and our sense of proprioception, which tells us where parts of our body are without us having to look. So this information is gathered, and it will make us aware of our bodies in space. And so then this awareness allows us to perform movement tasks. And our motor skills will give us the ability to control our movement in terms of direction, in terms of timing, and spatial awareness. So what are motor skills? Motor skills are divided into gross motor skills, which involves the movement of the whole body using your arms and legs. And then fine motor skills involves movement using your smaller muscles in your hands and feet. So to survive, this lion cub has to master the use of all its senses and muscles. And you can see mom guiding the cub as it practices these survival skills. So for children, we need to help them to be in full control of their muscles, to be able to hear and process a full range of sounds, and to use both their eyes together to process a full range of images. And if they have all of this, then they will be able to learn and consolidate concepts in the foundation phase. So there are many role players that need to work together to optimize a child's development. And I always feel that we need to start with ourselves. So as teachers, we need to make a conscious effort to be in good mental health so that we can maintain our passion. So I'm not going to be able to equip you today in my 20-minute talk to be able to develop a child's perceptual motor skills. I'm going to need you to use your passion to keep learning in today's fast-changing world. And then as teachers, as we learn new things, we must explore and experiment in our class, using new ideas and teaching methods. And if we keep growing, we will find new solutions for challenges in class. As a school, we can contribute by creating a framework to screen children as early as possible. So reflexes have to be checked, and they can be checked using simple movement activities like snow angels, jumping jacks, or skipping. Or strength can be assessed by checking balance. Our ears can be checked by clapping to a beat, and eyes can be checked by observing how eyes move when they follow an object. So when we find a problem then, we refer to allied health professionals, occupational therapists, speech therapists, optometrists, and educational psychologists. But besides making these referrals, we must consult with these professionals and get them to provide us with some in-service training opportunities. So as teachers, we're so overloaded with an ever-increasing list of responsibilities, and we have so many moving parts in class. We often put our heads down and we keep doing what we know, even if there are better alternatives. So in our schools, we need to create a culture of learning so that we can continue to grow. Then we've got to help our parents. And I know this is easier said than done, but if we develop a relationship of trust and cooperation, then supporting a child becomes much easier. When we're making recommendations, we must give parents the necessary information to help them understand the child's challenges so that they can act on our recommendations. And we must keep giving support, and we must follow up on our recommendations. But having said that, we do have to find a way not to let typical parents impact on our self-worth and peace of mind. So there is a depth of ideas available out there. I'm constantly amazed at the creativity out there to resolve challenges experienced in schools. So I'm going to give you a small example of my go-to activities that can be used in a class to promote perceptual motor development. So after a rushed and stressful morning getting to school, we always settle our nerves and ground ourselves with a self-massage. And it's a mind moves technique. We will then make a connection by sharing our thoughts and our feelings. Before we sit down at a desk, we activate our brains and bodies with movement. So preferably outdoors, but indoor movement can also be effective. So simple movement activities, stretching, rolling, crawling, jumping jacks, galloping, playing games like Simon Says, listen and move games. Then brain breaks are essential in class. The active concentration of a 7-year-old is around 20 minutes. So children need to break away and they need to be able to reset. Then we always have early finishers in class and we need to use that time. There's a variety of educational and fine motor activities that can be done in class, like puzzles, tracing, tangrams, dot to dots, Play-Doh. Kids love Play-Doh. And then children will joyfully engage in singing and dancing, which has many educational benefits. And there are many videos available on the internet that will do the job for you. And it's always a saving grace for me with my 2 left feet and poor rhythm. And then with so many social and motor benefits, we must make room for free play in the foundation phase. And it's a great time for a teacher to get through some one-on-one oral assessments while children are playing. Then I have a few daily reminders which help to guide me in my teaching. So I find that if I expect to have learning barriers and if I accept them, then I become more proactive and I spend less time in a negative space. I remind myself that I have a captive audience. So I have these kids every day for 5 hours in a weekend, every day for 5 hours, 5 days a week. So a lot can be achieved in this time. I'm also not just an imparter of information. I must consider the development of the whole child. So I'm sure you've heard of the term neuroplasticity. But if the brain is stimulated in the right way, it will make new cells and it can create new pathways. And conversely, if parts of the brain are not used, they will shut down. So we need to give good input to this brain, and then we will have a good input, give good output after that. And movement is a great way to help the brain grow. Then our brains have a working memory. And we can free up this working memory for higher order thinking if we consolidate our basic skills and we master them. Because when we master the basic skills, they become automatic. And then we can use that working memory to do more complex things. These are a few resources that keep me interested and have always offered me a lot to learn. So you can go onto the internet and have a look at them. So as I was preparing for this webinar, I was thinking back on a conversation that I had with an elderly lady some years ago. I had told her that I was a teacher, and her response to me was that, well, now that's a lifetime of daily blessings. So I want to thank you today for listening to this novice speaker. And may you all continue to enjoy your daily blessings as you go about changing the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nita. We really appreciate that. I think the way that you have shared with us your expertise, your knowledge about the motor development of our learners was very important. So we really want to thank you for that. Thank you very much. After Nita, we want to continue with what is happening in the foundation phase, because it's not only about motor development, but we also want to move to the more softer skills that we want to develop. And therefore, I want to welcome Aneen Dhoba. Aneen, and I'm going to ask Aneen to open her mic in the meantime and her video. And I want to say to her, Aneen works as a speech and language therapist, materials developer, and trainer. She has a master's degree focusing on second language acquisition. She has been part of inclusion projects in Gauteng and the Northwest provinces. She trained and wrote EFAL lesson plans in the GPLMS and PILO project in KwaZulu-Natal. During the lockdown in 2020, she developed parent guides for TV to give parents activities to do with their children to help them develop their EFAL skills. She has co-authored a number of books like All Children Can Learn, Second Language Learners in the Classroom, Institutional Learning Support Teams Manual, and English FAL Handbook for Teachers. She presently runs a private practice and consultancy in Johannesburg and helps teachers with literacy skills in schools, some in the Limpopo province. Thank you. Aneen, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. This afternoon, I'm going to be speaking about the development of auditory and visual perceptual skills to ensure effective teaching and learning of literacy and numeracy. I just want to add some of the things that to what Nita was saying about the skills that are needed for learning in the foundation phase. Language is a very important one, and it is the ability to understand and to use home language at the appropriate age level for that child. It is needed for learning how to read, to spell, to write, and to do numeracy. And it is also the ability to develop understanding and use of EFAL or any first additional language for learning to read, spell, write, and do numeracy. The perceptual skills that I'm going to be talking about today are auditory and visual perceptual skills. Then, as Nita said, the child needs to have good gross motor skills, that the child's big muscles for walking and kicking need to be well developed, because these then help the fine motor skills to develop, the small muscles that they need for doing up buttons and obviously learning to write in the foundation phase. A very important skill for children, or skills for children, are emotional and social skills. And this is because children use these to build relationships with their teachers and with other children. And then, of course, the all-important thinking skill, which helps them with problem solving. What is perception? Perception is the way that our brains interpret, give meaning, and respond to any stimuli that the brain receives. In the classroom, the stimuli are mainly auditory and visual, and these have to be processed accurately for any learning to take place. Auditory perception is the ability to process information which we receive through our ears. Children need to be able to recognize that language is made up of sentences, words, syllables, and sounds. And all of these relate to auditory perception. Visual perception is the ability to process information received through our eyes. And then all information that is received through all 5 senses needs to be integrated to make information meaningful. The auditory and visual perceptual skills that we need to develop in children are discrimination, analysis, synthesis, memory, figure ground, and closure. What is discrimination? It is the ability to hear and to see similarities and differences between objects, numbers, sounds, letters, and words. Difficulties with discrimination can cause children to reverse letters and numbers. So, for example, the B and the P, the B and the D, the P and the Q, to 9s and 6s, 3s and 5s, and even bigger numbers like 56, and they may write it as 65. It also causes difficulty with children being able to read and spell words correctly. So they might write udada when they should have written ubaba, or they might read udada instead of reading ubaba. They can also in numeracy confuse the operation signs. So what activities can teachers do to find out if children have auditory discrimination problems or to develop their auditory discrimination? We need to ask the children whether words that they hear are the same or different. So for example, in English, we would ask, is ran and run the same? Is bus and bus the same? Is thin and fin the same? Is net and knit the same? In isiZulu, teachers could ask, is vuma and vuna the same? Is hamba and hamba the same? Is bala and bala the same? Is dlala and dala the same? And from listening to the way I'm pronouncing the isiZulu words, you would realize that if I do this with children whose home language is isiZulu or who are learning isiZulu as a first additional language, I become the barrier because I'm not pronouncing the words correctly. And therefore, I cannot say that a child has auditory discrimination problems, and I cannot work with them on auditory discrimination. So it's very important if we're working in any language as a teacher that we can pronounce the words correctly and that the sounds correctly. And that goes obviously for English as well. Then other activities that we can do is ask the children, do the following words begin with a m sound? So does man begin with a m? Does book begin with a m? Does mouse begin with a m? Does light begin with a m? And I would like to suggest that if you're working with EFAL learners, that you use words that the child actually understands. because when we use words that the children do not understand and they don't know the vocabulary, it makes auditory discrimination more difficult, and it could be a language problem rather than an auditory discrimination problem. And then in English, we also need to ask the children the middle and the end sounds as well. Then with visual discrimination, to give the children two pictures that are very similar but have some differences, and then the child has to look at the pictures and say what are the differences. Then you could give them a picture where there are a lot of ducks, and the majority of the ducks are facing to the left, but one duck is facing to the right, and they have to tell you which is the duck that is different. And then it is important to do the same with letters, numbers, and words. So there I've given an example where the 69 is different to the 96, where the one that is different is the PQB, and the children need to see it. And there you can see we're not just using one letter, we're using more than one letter that the children have to look at. And then where the child has to look at two words and they have to write down the letter or tell you the letter that makes the words different. And there, obviously, it is the H that is making the two words different. Then it's important that we do activities that integrate visual and auditory discrimination. So, for example, you give children a list of short vowel words in English and long vowel words in English, and they have to draw a line from the short vowel sound to the long vowel sound. So, for example, fat to fate and bit to bite. And then in sentences where they have to circle the correct word. So, for example, they have to read the sentence and then say which word makes the sentence make sense. Do we say where do you live, or do we say where do you live? And the same with the next sentence where they're having to find whether it's TWO or 2O, T and an O with the sentence. And then obviously, if the English is not the home language, you need to think of similar exercises for home language, for isiZulu, for Afrikaans, etc. And here I've just given a few examples of integrated discrimination also for numeracy, where again, we're getting children to add and subtract, etc., with numbers that they may be confusing. So for example, if you look at the 9 minus 6, some children may see it and read it as 6 minus 9. Then analysis and synthesis. Analysis is the ability to break words into their sounds and or their syllables. So for example, cat into ka, at, inja into inja. And children need to do this both on an auditory and a visual level. Then synthesis is the ability to combine words and or syllables to form words. To combine sounds and or syllables to form words. So for example, a child needs to be able to say that ka, at gives you cat, that inja gives you inja. And again, on an auditory and a visual level. Difficulties in analysis and synthesis can cause barriers in the area of decoding, in sounding out for reading and spelling. And then what activities can teachers do? For analysis, to practice with the children where they have to break words, for example, into syllables. So ubaba becomes u-ba-ba. La lela becomes la, le, la, where the children are breaking the word into syllables. And then in English, to ask them to tell you the beginning, the end, and the middle sound in a word. So if you give them run, they need to be able to tell you that the beginning is a r, the end is an n, and the middle is an a. And then they need to be able to break words into their sounds. For example, make, and that you break it into a m and an a and a k. Then for synthesis, where you ask the child to tell you the word that these syllables or sounds make up. So for example, pa, e, n, what is the word? Pen, okay? La, le, la, what is the word? La, le, la. Or u, ma, ma, what is the word? Umama. And the same with our long vowels in English. And our blends, what is ba, r, a, n? What word does it make? Brain. And we need to do a similar thing on the visual level, where we write down the letters, the M, the U, and the D, but separately. And they need to be able to see that these letters make up the word mud. Or we break the word into syllables. Again, we write them down where we've written down the U and the M, separate from the F and the A, separate from the N and the A. And the children need to look at that and be able to say that the word is umfana. Then we can ask the children to rearrange the letters to make a word, where we've put the letters in the wrong order and they have to make the proper word. So for example, the F-N-U-D-A, and they get the funda, okay? L-A-B-A, and they get bala. And then the same in English, where you give them A-C-P, and they get cap, all right? And you also give the letters in flute incorrectly, like I've done there, and they have to be able to get the word flute. And then if we're integrating again, the visual and the auditory, in English, where we ask children to join two parts to make a word. And again, we do it where we've got grape and fruit, and we write it visually. We can do it auditorily, and they get the word grapefruit. And car and rot, and they get the word carrot. And there, one of the problems is that many children would read that word as car, okay, when in fact it is carrot. And that's something that we have to show the children. And then both in isiZulu, English, and Afrikaans, any other language, where we give a list of sounds, a list of letters, and they have to make as many words as they can from that list. And what they're going to be doing there is they're going to be doing it visually and auditorily, and that's how they will then integrate their visual and auditory skills. Memory. Auditory memory is the ability to store what has been heard and to recall it, to remember it. Auditory sequential memory is the ability to recall what has been heard, but in the correct order. And visual memory is the ability to store what has been seen and to recall it. Visual sequential memory is the ability to recall what has been seen in the correct order. Children obviously need to remember any information for a short period of time and for an extended period of time, where they have to remember that information for days, for weeks, for months, for years, and in fact for a lifetime. Memory difficulties can cause many barriers in the class. They can cause reading difficulties, comprehension difficulties, because the children are not remembering what they've read. Spelling, because they don't remember the order of the letters or the order of the sounds, and writing barriers, as well as they will have difficulty following instructions in class. They will have mental maths barriers, and they will also have an inability to complete problem-solving sums, once again, often because of their comprehension difficulties that could be caused by memory difficulties. Obviously, they can also be caused by language difficulties. So what activities can we do to help develop the children's memory? We can give them numbers and words, and they have to repeat them exactly as you say. So for example, I ask the child to repeat 7198, and they have to repeat it exactly as I say, and it's 7198. And then you can see I've given a longer list. And here we've got words that the children need to repeat. So for example, hop, walk, jump, and run, and draw is one list. And the next list is hippo, red, child, and ankle. And it's just to remember that the first list is easier for children to remember because in fact, those words are related to each other. Whereas when you give children words that are unrelated, like hippo and child and red and ankle, it is more difficult for them to remember. So you need to do a combination of both. With African languages, we would give children fewer words to remember than what is expected in English, as these words are generally longer. Children need to be able to repeat sentences and instructions. And then it's important to read a story to children, but with no pictures, because remember, we're just doing an auditory activity. And then the child must tell the story back to you. On the visual level, let the child look at a picture that has got objects in it. Then you remove the picture and they must tell you what objects were in the picture. And it's important to do the same with numbers, letters, and words. And they must recall what numbers they saw, what letters they saw, and what words they saw. Then integrating auditory and visual memory, where you've given them on a piece of paper numbers or letters or words, different numbers, different letters, different words, and then the teacher, calls out a number and they have to circle it. And then just to help you, I'm sure many of you have heard of this method, but just in terms of spelling corrections, where the child writes the correct word. So for example, sun, they would write sun down. Then they look at it and they read it, and they read sun. Then they look at it again in order for them to see that sun is made up of an N or an S, a U, and an N. Then they cover the word with their hand, and then they write the word in order to see whether they can write it. Obviously, if they write sun incorrectly, they need to start all over again. And then it's important to read stories with or without pictures, and then to ask the children questions on an oral level and on a written level. And this is obviously often called listening comprehensions. But it's very important to see whether the children can do this, what their memories are like. Then figure ground. Auditory figure ground is the ability to focus on a primary or the most important stimulus when there are other stimuli present. So for example, children need to be able to focus on their work, to be able to focus on what the teacher's saying without being distracted by children walking past the classroom or classroom noise. And then visual figure ground is the ability to distinguish between the foreground and the background. Figure ground difficulties can cause a number of barriers. For example, concentration. Copying, children will have difficulty copying from the board or even from a piece of paper or a book next to them. They often will lose their place when they're reading or when they're doing work. That they will have reading difficulties and general learning difficulties. So what activities can be done? When children are working, we need to expose them to noises. It's important for them not to expect the classroom or the school to be completely silent. We need to read out words, okay? And every time they hear a particular sound, for example, we read out a list of words and we tell them that they must put their hand up whenever they hear the S sound. So when they hear the S at the beginning of sun, they raise their hand. When you give them the word mat, they would not raise their hand because there isn't a S in it. And then they need to be able to, if you spot the differences in pictures. So for example, you could give them a list of all different letters, and then they have to circle all the P's. You could give them a list of numbers or, on a piece of paper, and they have to circle all the 5s on the page. And then auditory closure. Auditory closure is the ability to complete a word, a sentence, or a message when some information is missing. And visual closure is the ability to see a completed symbol, form, picture, word, sentence, when only part of it is given. And poor visual or auditory closure can affect children's ability to spell, to complete comprehension sentences, to write stories, and to do maths tasks. And also it can cause difficulties for children when they have to understand instructions, if they've missed part of the instruction because of noise. So on an auditory level, we can give children parts of words, parts of sentences and stories, and they have to complete them. So for example, we can give a child the 2 sounds da, and then they have to tell us the word, and they could say dog, or they could say dot. You can give them a sentence, like, for example, the boy to the shop, and they have to be able to complete it and get the boy went to the shop or the boy goes to the shop. On the visual level again, we give them shapes, symbols, pictures, letters, numbers, words, and sentences where a part is missing, and they have to complete the shape, the picture, the letter, the word, the sentence. So just to end off by saying, obviously, perceptual skills are essential for the development of reading, writing, and numeracy in the foundation phase. They need to be practiced and used in all grades from grade R to grade 3. And particularly in grade 1 to grade 3, children need to be able to use their auditory and visual perceptual skills when they are reading, when they are writing, and when they are doing numeracy. And early identification of any difficulty is very important. And when you have identified that there's a difficulty, different activities need to be done with the child or with the group of children in order to develop their perceptual skills. And then when setting class and assessment tasks, teachers need to be aware of perceptual barriers, and to just when children are completing these class tasks and assessment tasks, just to work out whether it is a perceptual barrier that's causing a problem. And then more activities can be obtained from a speech and language and occupational therapists, and obviously by Googling. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Aneen. May I ask you to stop sharing, please? And now let me just find my screen again, because it stopped my screen when you were busy there, but it's not a challenge. We will have my screen back on now. I just want to find the presentation and then we can start immediately. Colleagues, I I sincerely apologize for this. It just doesn't want to open my screen currently. There we go. I've got my screen back, and now we can continue. Aneen, thank you very much for what you have shared with us. And I want to say to you, yes, we always think a child can just listen and hear and everything is fine. But you have given us insight this afternoon that it's not only listening and hearing or seeing that is important, but that there is the fine nuances that we have in listening and in seeing that is important in the classroom. Thank you very much for that. We do appreciate. Now, we will all say childhood is not a race to see how quickly a child can read, write, and count. It is a small window of time to learn and develop at the pace that is right for each and every individual child. With that, I want to introduce our third speaker, Mr. Brent Hutchison. Brent Hutchison is a director of Care for Education and a non-profit organization here in South Africa, which partners with the Lego Foundation to uplift children, schools, and organizations in under-resourced communities. Brent is a true believer in the power of play in learning, and through play, children develop vital perceptual motor abilities, as well as develop their imagination, intelligence, social, emotional, and language skills. Brent is an Ashoka Fellow and is currently also chairman of the Advisory Council of the World Robot Olympiad. Thank you, Brent. We hand over to you and wait to hear your story.
I've unmuted myself. Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. And it's a real pleasure and honor to be here this afternoon and to be able to address all of you. You'll notice from the introduction that I am working in education and helping children. But today I'm going to be coming to you from the point of view of a parent. And I don't want to be talking to you as a professional. I want to be talking to you as a parent. And hoping that you'll understand that what I'm sharing today is meaningful and what a parent may go through if a child is having difficulties with perceptual development and what it might feel like for a parent. It's just an example of what happened to my wife and I. And it may not be the same example that happens to everybody else, but it's just our story. And I'd like to share that story with you. And I'm going to just open my screen because I've got pictures so that hopefully you can see a little bit about what's happened with us. So it all starts with, just want to turn it on. Seems to be going. Okay. It all starts with our daughter, Kelly. So I'd like you to meet Kelly. This is Kelly at the start of grade 3. And Kelly was a very happy little girl. My wife and I, really enjoyed her at home and being around her and, her growing up with us and her showing us all about how excited she was around the world. And we thought we had a happy, excited little girl who loved school. She wanted to go to school every single day. And at the start of grade 3, her teacher called my wife in, and my wife had just started teaching at that school. And so it was a teacher at the school where my daughter was. And the teacher wanted to meet us. And I had been teaching at that school previously for many years. So my wife had 11 years experience. I had 11 years experience. So we thought we were, we had experience as teachers and we thought we knew what was going on. And we were called into a meeting with the headmistress and this teacher. And we were told that our daughter has some very serious, or they believe she had some very serious learning difficulties. And we were aware that there were maybe 1 or 2, but as most parents do, we probably went into denial and put up a wall. And we were kind of asking questions in the back of our head, like, do the teachers even know this child? I mean, at home, this is not what we've seen. What have they seen at school? What's going on here? What's happening? We know children. We tell other teachers, other parents about their children. How come this is happening to us? And all the questions and all the horrible things that parents go through. The reality was we had to deal with it. And not only did we have to deal with the issues, but they had told us that potentially Kelly needs to go to a special school. And this really caught us. So not only did we find out there were problems, and this was the first really that we had heard about the problems, but we were told that potentially these problems were so severe, she might need to go to a special school. And so my wife and I didn't react very well to that. And for parents out there, I just want to say to you that that's probably a very normal process. And it's more about what you do after that. So the shock, yes, handle the shock, but after the shock, what do you do about it? And are you going to action something to be able to help your children? So we were asked to do some assessments, and the advice that we got was to do a full team assessment, which is more than just one person looking at Kelly, which we decided to do. So we decided if we are going to do something, let's do whatever we can. Let's do the most that we can to try and help her. We had been warned that potentially, if it was only picked up for the first time in grade 3, that she may have been intelligent enough to mask it up until that stage. And so what we thought she was able to do may not be what she was able to do. So we were warned about that. So the team assessment happened, and after that, we were told that there were many barriers to learning. And I'm just going to list some of the barriers to learning that came up. And some of the speakers before me, Nita and Aneen, covered those beautifully. So you'll see it links perfectly to the content that they were delivering today. So the first one, which comes up, and you've seen this has been a lot today, as people have spoken about this a lot, auditory processing disorder. And as a teacher with many years of experience, auditory, I first of all straight away thought, oh dear, there's something wrong with the ears, she can't hear. And we just got to be so careful about this. There's so many terms out there that people don't really understand. You hear them, but you've never investigated them and you don't really understand them. So do your homework. Whatever you're told, go do your research before you start speaking to the teachers or giving teachers answers or suggestions or what you think as a parent should happen. First, go and do your homework. So I had to go and find out really what this was all about. And I wasn't a foundation phase teacher. So this wasn't an area that I had studied. My wife knew more about it, and she knew that it had something to do with the ears, but it wasn't a hearing problem per se. We were then told she had concentration difficulties, visual perceptual difficulties. Now you'll notice how all these are linked, and the previous speakers today have told you that that's most likely to happen. And she had significant reading difficulties. At the time, they would say dyslexia. They don't really say that now. So we were told that she has dyslexia. So we were quite shocked by all of this, and we were like, what do we do? Okay. So auditory processing, just to give you an example, you've seen some lists today of what that looked like. And to be honest, if I went through this list and thought about my daughter at the time, as engaged as she was, as excited as she was to go to school, I could tick some of these off. I definitely could. And probably more. No, actually nearly all of them. And so in reality, there were some issues. And as parents, we tend to not look at that. The recommendations came back. The first thing was that she has to go for a visual test. And you would have noticed today that was linked to everything that happens. And so we sent Kelly off for a visual test. And by the middle of grade 3, towards the end of grade 3, she had prescription glasses and was able to read a little bit better and do a lot more of the exercises that were required to help her. We were also advised by the specialists at the time that we could look into a program like WiseEye, which is a program that just does many of what Aneen was talking about now, which is repetition of numbers, reading numbers, looking for numbers in patterns, scanning exercises, and fantastic exercises. And this is just one example of probably many programs out there that parents could subscribe to. And this was a program that we took on. As my wife was a teacher, she was able to do this on a daily session with my daughter, Kelly. But it was hard work. This she did every single day. And I would arrive home on many occasions where both Kelly and my wife were crying. So this was not easy. This wasn't all that we did. We had to do occupational therapy, speech therapy, remedial therapy. And if you look at what Nita said in the beginning, these are all linked again. And these are all the extras that need to be used to try and help the child. And so some of these were once a week, some of them were twice a week. But every single day, my daughter was doing WiseEye. Here's a picture of her smiling, doing her homework. That didn't happen often. And I'm sure many of you that are faced with this type of problem at home have the same issue. She was probably far more interested in the Lego that's around her than the homework. And this is not how she should be doing homework. But what I do want to say to you is the following. If your child, and this is from a parent's perspective, if your child has reading problems, Don't ask the teacher as a parent, don't think that you can fix this on your own. Don't ask the teacher for more reading homework. If your child has maths problems, don't ask the teacher for more maths problems. This is not going to help your child. Your child needs to be seen by somebody who really understands how to help them. It is such a skill and it's such a gift that we can send our children to these people to get help from them and to get the advice that we need to try and help these children. And this help and advice comes in all different shapes and sizes. So please don't think that there's one solution, that if you hear a friend has got a solution, that solution is going to work for you, because it's definitely not. So one of the other things about perceptual development is that we want children to use their body and their brain at the same time. It's a really important process, not just sitting still and using their brain and doing homework and then running around outside, but doing both of those things at the same time. And so quite often, if you take a sport that allows you to really focus on sequencing and listening to music and control, so an individual sport, that can help. And so we got Kelly to choose one, and she chose rhythmic gymnastics. So we enrolled her into rhythmic gymnastics, which is a very individualistic sport. And she had to then go and learn all of those skills. So that was about controlling her body and learning to control her body and her mind at the same time. And Kelly, over the years, developed into an incredible little gymnast and represented Gauteng. She was really talented. And that was through many, many years of practicing and stretching and doing everything. But what it was doing, it was developing her brain and her body at the same time. And that, added to the work that we were doing with her, was assisting and helping. Don't punish the children and don't take away their sports. That may not help. And so this is about looking at a holistic program to help your children as they encounter these tough times. So let's just have a look at the progress, her academic and sporting progress over primary school and high school, and what happened to Kelly. I just want to tell you that picking it up in grade 3 is very late, and a lot of people will tell you that. You can't fix everything, and you mustn't think that these therapists are in a very short space of time going to fix everything. It takes time, and they can fix certain things, but they can put other steps in place, other foundations that will help these children to be successful. So at the end of grade 7, Kelly became a prefect at the school that she was supposed to lead. So working with the teachers, working with the school, and having the parents and all the therapists work together, we were able to get Kelly through and to be able to turn her into a confident young lady that was able to take on high school and to take the same enthusiasm that she had for primary school into high school. During high school, Kelly did exceptionally well. Because of the sports, she continued with the sports, and she was very lucky to become Sportswoman of the Year for many of her high school years. Which also helped her to get her white blazer, which is a double honors blazer at the school, and a really big achievement in any child's life. At the end of high school, she became a prefect and was an active member in the school and put a lot back into the school. So here's a young child who had serious problems and were able to overcome a lot of those problems. Does that mean that her academic career is perfect at this stage? Not yet, but look what happens. Let's meet Kelly now. Kelly now has passed her B.Ed in foundation phase, and she's gone on and done her B.Ed honors in learning support because she really wants to help children that were struggling like she was. So in helping somebody, we can actually turn them into somebody who could help many other children. And I think that's the message to the parents. You don't know what your help is going to end up doing. It's hard work. It's extremely hard work, but there are potentially great rewards at the end of that hard work. Kelly has also now moved on and become a teacher, and she's teaching in Mexico at the moment. So she's in Mexico City at a private school, and she's teaching a grade 4 class because the school put her into grade 4, even though that she's a foundation phase teacher. And the funny thing is right now, if the kids go to Kelly with a word that's quite difficult, she still can't spell it, and she has to use Google to help her spell it. But that doesn't stop her from being the most amazing, enthusiastic, and brilliant teacher, and giving back to the children and helping children with very serious problems in the same way that we were able to help her. And very importantly, I want to say that it's not about being good parents or that the parents did anything correctly, because we probably didn't approach it correctly in the beginning. It was about reaching out to the professionals who are there to support us and to help us. And so my plea to you today is continue to support your children, get the help that they need, and potentially you'll also have children that grow up like Kelly. Thank you very much.
Brent, thank you very, very much for those inspiring words that you have just shared with us. it is really making us realize how important it is to ensure that we are at the stage where we will start to listen to our parents and get our parents also to work with us. Although we are saying that lightly, and we know it's not an easy task, it's actually a daunting task to get our parents to work with us. But your message is so inspiring that is saying to us as educators, please let us continue. We cannot stop in the middle with a child and never give up on any child. With those words, I want to hand over to Busisiwe Nkosi and the team, that foundation phase team, that will handle all the questions. Thank you, Busisiwe. And please post your questions in the chat box. Thank you very much. Thanks, Busisiwe.
Thank you, Tim, and good afternoon to the participants. Most of the comments were to thank the speakers, and most of the questions were answered about the register, and the participants were also asking if they will receive the recordings and the slides. Those questions were answered. One question that was not answered, I think it's being directed, actually it was supposed to be directed to Nita, but when I read the question, actually it's being directed to Department of Education. Now, if the teachers are aware that these perceptual skills are important, and now that they are dealing with these learners every day that are lacking these skills, why is the department trying to formalize from the ECD FP education? Nog slegs, there's formal assessment in the foundation phase. So I'm not sure, Macy, who's going to answer that.
Thank you very much for that, Busi. Can I ask that the panelists, maybe Chief Director that is here, can you switch on your mic that people can see you? Also Kulu, that is the CES for Curriculum Foundation Phase, and one of the two of you, or Aneen, you, and I'll also ask Nita to switch on her video just to answer the question. Thank you, Busi. Chief Director, I think we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I think it's very important and very timely, the topics that were dealt with in terms of perceptual development today. I think especially from the different viewpoints they were provided, give us a good overview of the importance of perceptual development. I also do believe that in our school teachers who've joined, hoping that in the presentations you've picked up a tip or two, and I do know that the colleagues will avail the presentations to you so that you can access the information and use it to improve your own classroom practice. But I think most importantly is that at the end of the day, we as educators need to ensure that each and every learner in each and every single classroom, whether it is a foundation phase classroom, a senior phase classroom, an FET classroom, is given the opportunity to use and practice their language skills within the subject context. Language and the use of language and perceptual skills must not be limited only to the foundational development of literacy and numeracy in the foundation phase, but should be something that teachers give attention to throughout. I'm just thinking, for example, from my own teaching experience, when teaching the art of summary writing in a language classroom, how important that skill was, not only as a language skill, but as a skill that taught perception about what information you pick up in a text, in a narrative, and how you use that information, and how you change that, how you are able to change that information into your own words. So all throughout the schooling system, this is a very important part of development that should never, never be forgotten, and all teachers should indeed be attending to it. So thank you so much, Chair, for the opportunity to input. Thank you.
Okay, I won't.
Thank you, Chief Director. Another concern is that teachers are saying they are constantly have more work than they can realistically get through the day. So I think it's a issue of time management again, and of the others. They were saying the ATP is packed and they don't get time to play with the learners. Here's another one. Keeping in mind the COVID-19 regulations in mind, having more than 35 learners in one class. Now we know how to identify the problems, but what they would like to have is practical solutions on how to fix these problems. I'm not sure if this is addressed to Nita or any panelist, if you can help with practical solutions. I think Brent mentioned different sources to say.
And so,
Nita, yes.
can I give a response to that? When I was preparing this presentation, I really had to hone down on what I felt was essential to say. It was impossible for me to give, like I said, in 20 minutes, all that I could to assist you to be able to resolve all problems in your class. So I'm again just urging you to dig into your passion and research and make connections with people who have this knowledge. And you don't have to learn it all in one day. You take small little baby steps, and every day you learn something new and you try it out in class.
Can I just also say that I hope some of the activities I gave, that you'll be able to use them with your children, because once you've identified the problem, you really just need to keep on doing different activities like the ones I gave with the children to help them. Unfortunately, as we all know, there isn't a very quick solution. You really have to keep on practicing, sometimes with the children as individuals and with them in groups. And I know in big classrooms it is hard, but it's the only way, in fact, that the children will overcome the barriers. Unfortunately, they won't overcome them on their own if they don't get help.
Thank you, colleagues. And the Macy, would you like to answer that one? The colleagues are asking if this is will they get CPD points?
Thank you very much, Busi. Unfortunately, no, there is no SACE points allocated to the webinar. This is for self-development and enrichment for each and every person that is attending here this afternoon. I think I must also just mention that all the presentations this afternoon, as well as the recording, will be shared with all of our participants for the self-enrichment this afternoon. I think it's very important to file it then as part of your resources to refer to in future. Thank you, Busi.
Thank you, Macy. Panelists, the teachers are asking, how do they deal with parents who are on denial? They are dealing with these problems every day, and the parents, they don't have that buy-in. Now the issue is, so that they work together, how can they assist the parents to understand poor children who are struggling in any way? Can I start with you, Nita?
Okay.
Or you want to come in, Aneen?
Okay, all right.
So I agree with you. I mean, it's an endless battle sometimes with parents who are struggling to accept what you're telling them. You try again, and then you sometimes have to accept that you have to let go. parents are in denial for different reasons. And at some point you have to accept to let it be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say that sometimes parents can understand more if you show them exactly what you are talking about. So, for example, if you can show them, what the child is achieving and perhaps what another child is achieving, not showing them, the name of other children. But I think sometimes when we just talk to parents, they don't always understand exactly what we are saying. And we need to perhaps show them in more detail, and also to explain to them the consequences of not doing anything. Because again, I think a lot of parents don't understand that. They just think somehow or another it might come right on its own. And then, as Nita said, I know with some parents that I've worked with, I have had to explain to them over and over again. And it might be only in the 4th term or in grade 2 that they actually do something when, you've already explained in grade 1. It's hard to hear. All of us who are parents know it's very hard to hear that there is a difficulty with your child and that your child's not coping.
Thank you, Aneen. Brent, would you like to add to that as a parent?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think, I'm experiencing it now where my wife, who's a teacher and has continued to teach for the next, 11 years, and she's having difficulties with parents now that she's having to tell that there's something wrong with their children. And because she's experienced it herself, perhaps she has a slightly better way of handling it. But the reality is that there is no answer. I think Nita is right. There's some parents who just, are going to be difficult and not want to hear it. But I would say step 1 for me would be, once you've told the parents, give them some time, because the wall is up and they're not going to drop the wall, and you may need to give them some time. And then Aneen's perfectly right, is just bring them in and show them something practical. Show them that this is not something to feel embarrassed about or to have the community look at them in a strange way or have their friends worry about their children, because that's really why most of them don't do it. They're more worried about what people think and say than worried about helping their own children. And that's not all parents, but just to say that the ones that are finding it difficult, give them time, then bring them in, give them something very practical, show them, and then very clearly point out what's going to happen if it doesn't get fixed. Because there's some really good research out there that will tell you what your chances are versus what your chances are if you do something about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, panelists. A colleague here, she's asking, is it possible that the age of a child could be a barrier? I think she's got learners who are under 7 years old in her class. Is it possible that the age is contributing to all these problems?
Yeah, so if I can contribute there. I have been trying from the time I practice as an occupational therapist throughout my teaching to convince whoever I speak to in the education field to sort out the correct age that children can enter into grade 1. It is true. The younger child will struggle in class because they have not had the time and the opportunity to develop what they need to develop. I haven't gotten it right, but I'm going to keep trying. In a grade 1 class, you can have a child that is 7 years old and a child that is 5.5. So it is a challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nita. Aneen, do you want to add? Or?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I agree that, I definitely don't think children should be in grade 1 if they're 4 turning 5 or something like that. But the other thing is, not to always think that it's age that's the problem, because sometimes children can actually have, real problems. And it's not the age factor, it's the fact that they do have perceptual or language problems, and those need to be dealt with. Because, you might say that they shouldn't be in grade 1 because they are 5.5. They must only be there when they 6 or 6.5. But in fact, they have serious difficulties, and it's not their age. So it's just to look at that as well. I do think age is a factor. I think if the department says children should be 6 turning 7 in grade 1, then perhaps that is what should happen. But it's not always so easy, particularly in rural areas, because parents do send their children to school. But it's just to look at a variety of factors that might be causing barriers. That's all I'm thinking.
Okay, thank you. This one is addressed to you, Aneen.
Yes.
There's a learner in the class. This child, when he's supposed to write the word dog, the learner writes God. What type of a barrier is this child experiencing, and what type of support can this teacher offer to the child?
Okay, from what the person's saying, it sounds like more of a visual a problem. Okay, and it could be the visual memory. What they're doing there is they seem to be reversing the letters. So dog. I think, did you say that then they write God, or what do they write?
Yes, God.
Yes. Okay. So there you can see that they've reversed the D is being written as a G, and so they haven't. So it can be a visual perceptual problem. It could, in fact, also be an auditory perception. So I would say that the child would most probably have, if you'd have to do a more in-depth assessment, but is likely to have visual and auditory problems, that they might not be hearing, because if you think of the D and the G, it is a fairly similar sound. So it could be auditory discrimination and visual discrimination problems, but it can also be visual memory problems where they're actually reversing the order of the letters. Okay. And then you would have to work on activities to develop their visual memory. And if it's also an auditory discrimination and auditory memory difficulty, which it could also be, they're getting the R sound in the middle, but the other 2 sounds they aren't getting. You would have to work on that area, on the visual memory, and then the auditory discrimination, as well as perhaps the visual discrimination. They should be making more errors, in fact, in that area, not just with the one word, if there is a serious problem.
Thank you, Aneen. Macy, I'm not sure if the other directorates are here. There's a question here. They are asking, where can they get the occupational therapists if they can't afford to pay the private therapists? Maybe Macy and the team can answer this one. Unless Aneen and Nita, you know.
Yeah, well, the hospitals have therapists, like, for example, Chris Harney, Baragwanath, has therapists if there are, children there. Unfortunately, therapists are not available abundantly, as we say, but hospitals do often have therapists.
Thank you.
Aneen,
Thank you.
Aneen, thank you for that. Busi, may I continue, please?
Yes, Macy, and that was the last question. You can sort of take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree with Aneen that unfortunately our therapists are not abundantly available, but the procedure that teachers then will have to follow, do not stop referring the child. You refer the child to the clinic, and the clinic can then make the referral to the hospital, and the hospital will eventually, unfortunately, get the child to the necessary therapist. But it's important that the teacher must never give up on the child, and they must please always keep on referring the child. And whilst you're referring the child, do not sit back. Please keep on trying, because the little that you are doing will not harm the child, but it can only be to the benefit of that learner and the parents. So please keep on trying. Thank you, Busi.
Thank you, Messi. Back to the program director. That was the last question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions. And now I want to continue, and let us move to the next one, where we will start with the closing remarks. The closing remarks will be done by Director Antoinette Nicolai. So I'm asking Director Nicolai to please open her mic and then start to share with us her screen. Thank you, Director.
Thank you so much, Program Director. I hope that you can all hear me. Let me just try to share my screen. It did not allow me now. Maybe, Macy, you can just upload my 3 slides for me, if you don't mind, and I will continue to do the closing remarks. I'm hoping that you can actually see me now. Wow, what a on-point focused webinar with the relevant experts to guide us. I've really enjoyed listening to the experts. I have also enjoyed the conversations and the questions that our audience has raised, the teachers in the classrooms. The development of the learner in the foundation phase really starts from birth. And whilst we do not have control over the development at home, our responsibility starts when the learner enters the formal schooling system. All learners can learn. It is our responsibility as teachers, as SMT members, to ensure that all the perceptual skills are developed from the onset in grade 1, and that it is reinforced throughout the foundation phase. Nita Lala highlighted to us the importance of perceptual motor development, showing that gross motor development is very important for balance, to orientate ourselves and to move around. The development of fine motor skills impact on behavior in the classroom and on other skills such as writing skills. The learner might be able to see and hear. We as teachers should know what they see and what they hear, as well as how they understand and interpret and the impact of that. Aneen Dhoba explained to us the 6 different categories, including discrimination, analysis, synthesis, memory, figure ground, and closure for both auditory and visual perception that impact directly on academics work in the classroom. Learners are assumed to have mastered these skills. These skills are critical and need to be taught, mastered, and reinforced throughout the entire foundation phase to ensure that learners can learn optimally. Brent showed us through the story of Kelly that learners can succeed irrespective of the barriers which they may have. It is important for teachers to take the hands of the parents, of the learners, and the therapists to ensure that we lead our learners to perform at their best at all times. The road may be a long one and it may be a difficult one, but persistence is the only answer. Success is not only a dream, but through persistence, it will become a reality. Perceptual development can never be a once-off development. It is a continuum. As the teacher, the parent, the departmental official, and even the medical practitioner, we need to observe, assess, plan, intervene, and lead every learner on the road to success. So the theme of this webinar, it's about the correct perceptual development in the foundation phase, and that it is very important to ensure a strong foundation in literacy and numeracy skills and learner development. So as the concluding of my concluding and my final remarks, I want to just indicate that we are going to have follow-up webinars. So this was the basic one on perceptual development. The following webinar, which I would like for all of you to diarize as foundation phase specialists, whether you are a teacher, an SMT member, or a person who supports a school as a district official or a head office official, as a partner out there who supports what we are doing in education. We're going to have an African languages webinar on the 28th of October. The theme of that webinar is, why are South African learners struggling to read in African languages? A series of webinars will follow that one, where we're going to guide you in terms of how can you go about in the classroom to assist struggling readers. So please watch out for the invitation for that one. The follow-up webinar after that one will be on the 11th of November, where we're going to have a webinar focusing on English and Afrikaans. And the theme will focus on how to teach EFAL, English First Additional Language, effectively, to ensure a smooth transition into the intermediate phase. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. We appreciate what you have just shared with us, and without wasting any time, because we are getting to a late time in the afternoon, I want to hand over for the vote of thanks to the Provincial Head for Foundation Phase Curriculum, Ms. Kulu Makaga. We receive information through our senses, we organize this information, and we use it to interact with the environment. Thank you, Kulu.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My task is to do the vote of thanks. I'm going to start by thanking our three speakers for insightful and very informative presentations. I saw on the chat box, you know, the attendees were commending the speakers for the insightful presentations. Ms. Nita, Lala, thank you very much for educating us on the fact that we need to love what we do. And if we love what we do, and this was evident in your presentation. And then Ms. Aneen Dhoba, thank you very much for demystifying the perceptual program. Sometimes when we hear about visual discrimination, foreground discrimination, we think this is not ours, it's for someone else. Thank you. Now we can see that it's relevant for us in the classroom as teachers. To Mr. Brent Hutchison, thank you for sharing your personal space with us today, and also for a very inspiring journey with your child. I think as parents and as teachers, we are highly inspired by, you know, sharing this story of your child with us today. I also want to thank the participants, starting with the GDE senior management, our DDG, Advocate Alison Benson, and also our Chief Director, Nadine Pote, our directors, as well as our chief directors in districts, as well as head office. I want to take this opportunity to thank our teachers, our departmental heads, all our SMTs, deputy principals and principals included, provincial officials, district officials, departmental officials from other provinces. I hear we have other provinces here, our social partners, NGOs, higher education institutions, and all the attendees that I have not mentioned. I want to sincerely thank Sci-Bono Discovery Center. This webinar has been a success because they have hosted the webinar for us, and they also provided us with technical support, the highly needed technical support. Special thanks to Enoch Mangune and his team from Sci-Bono for running this program successfully. Next slide, please. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our DDG, Alison Benson. When she started with the webinar, we thought it was something very impossible. So we want to thank you for inspiring the curriculum branch to host webinars. Chief Director, CCI, Nadine Pote, for setting the scene for us through the opening remarks. Our Director, GET Curriculum Coordination, Ms. Antoinette Nicolai, for giving us support throughout and guidance. And I think that is why this webinar has been a success. Foundation Phase team for preparations for this webinar. Life Skills Foundation Phase district officials for assisting us with inviting colleagues from the schools. Zelene Favors, who was the first one to host webinars, she actually assisted us a lot in making sure that this webinar runs smoothly. Our Directorate Communication for preparing the webinar invitation and the program. Last but not least, the chairperson, Macy Swanepoel, and the organizer of this webinar. I want to take this opportunity, Macy, to thank you for your commitment and dedication. I think the webinar was a resounding success because of your hard work. And also let me thank you for the smooth sailing of the webinar program that you steered so successfully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kulu. With that, I will neglect my duty if I also do not thank Kulu for the thank you that she has presented with us, with her guidance and leadership, as well as with the senior management. This webinar was made possible today. So thank you, Kulu, for being our senior and for all the work that you are doing with us. To each and everyone that was here, please feel free to give us feedback in the chat box, because we will read it. We will definitely take it into consideration. And if you have ideas for future webinars, information that you would like to have, please share that also with us, so that when we go ahead and we plan for 2022, that we can take that into consideration. Thank you, and may you have a safe afternoon, and may the fourth term be smooth sailing for everybody. Thank you very much. Goodbye. May we ask all participants to please leave the platform. When you leave the platform, log off so that we can close the platform. It will be open, say, for 5 minutes to give everybody a chance to log off. Thank you.
Well done, team. Well done. Thank you very much for all your support, your hard work, and your commitment.
Thank you, Director. Hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Enoch, thank you very much. Colleagues, I will send out the meeting for tomorrow morning. Director, what time would you like us to have the meeting? The feedback meeting?